Hello and welcome back to another video tutorial with me, Jade from So Jealous in Plymouth. Today we're going to have a look at pattern reading specifically for crochet in this video, and I have with me a traditional crochet pattern for blankets that's written by some of the sort of main manufacturers and yarn suppliers, and then I'm also going to go through with you one of my Amigurumi patterns which is written in the round. The mainstream one from UK hand knitting is written in UK terminology and my patterns are written in US terminology, and we're going to go through, have a little look, and hopefully by the end of it you'll have a little bit more confidence in terms of patterns and what they mean. So this one is by the UK Hand Knitting Association, and you can see that it's a crochet design. It uses double knitting, which is a yarn weight, and we've also got here the pattern name or number. This one comes with 3 different designs, all similar with slight variations, and like I said, here's the pattern number as well. And that's obviously important if you want to find the pattern, recommend the pattern, etc. So this is a leaflet pattern, and as we open it up there are 2 sides to this leaflet. So let's have a little look at the first side. So this is where all of the important information is. This talks to us about the size of the blanket, so how large the blanket will work up to be once completed. It tells us the materials that we need. So the tools for this one is a 4mm crochet hook. It's also going to tell us how much yarn we need. So this is explaining that blanket 1 requires X amount of yarn, blanket 2, blanket 3, etc. It will break down how many grams of ball we need and the specific colours in order to replicate the pattern on the front. And then most importantly perhaps is the abbreviations table. So wherever you see shorthand on your pattern, if you're unsure what it means, revert to your abbreviation table and it will fully explain what it is that the pattern is asking you to do. And I can't stress enough how important this is. I would sometimes recommend perhaps writing this out and definitely getting familiar before you commence your pattern with what the abbreviations mean beforehand. It's always a good idea to read through your pattern at least once or twice before you start working on it, just to make sure that you're familiar with what the expectation is in terms of what you need to do next. So this is the abbreviations table, and then this blanket also talks about tension, just to make sure that you are working to the right tension to create the same size as recommended and to use the same amount of yarn as it suggests. So tension's really important here. This one is explaining you'll need to do so many rows and so many stitches in order to create the same size tension square. If you find that you have too many stitches, so let's say it calls for 13 stitches in a 10cm square and you find yourself with 17, that means that your tension is too tight and your blanket will come up considerably smaller. Likewise, if it says for you to have 13 but you find yourself with only 10, your tension is too loose and you'll use more materials and it will come out larger than what it's intended. So it's really important to be mindful of that. The way that you deal with tension, if you are a tight crocheter, you'd need to consider going up by 0.5 or a whole hook size. And if you are a loose crocheter, you'll need to come down either 0.5 or a whole hook size. As a beginner, almost always you'll be slightly tight. Don't worry about that. That's to be expected. So this is a little bit of information about the pattern. These are sort of the instructions, things that you need to know before you commence actually working on your project. Right, so let's flip this over and let's have a look at what the actual pattern instructions say. So you can see here we've got 3 columns. Each column relates to one of the blanket patterns, which is useful to know. Just to zoom out there a little bit and show you it in full. So blanket 1, blanket 2 and blanket 3. And you can see here along the top, it's confirming that we are only using a 4mm hook, which matches the information that we had on the other side in reference to tools. So we're going to have a little look at blanket number 2. So I'm just going to zoom in here and let's have a little discussion about this pattern. So this is telling me using a 4mm crochet hook to make 89 chains. And the reason that I know that is because the CH is an abbreviation. And if I flip this over, I can see that CH equals chain. And if you have a look at some of our other videos on our website, you will see how it is that we chain in crochet. Once I've done my 89 chains, we're then going to have a look at our foundation row. So this is telling me to do a double crochet. I know that because it says DC. And if I were to look back on the front page, it would confirm to me that DC does in fact equal double crochet. So this pattern is telling me to work into the 3rd chain from the hook and complete my double crochet. And then I can see there's an asterisk there, which means I'm going to repeat from that asterisk all the way down as the instructions tell me, which is to complete 1 double crochet in each of the foundation chains. And you will see that we have less double crochets than what we chained, and that is because we are accounting for our turning chain in our foundation chain. And then once we've done that, we're going to chain 1. So we're again reintroducing that turning chain before we commence with working back along the row. And then it's telling me to repeat row 2. So by the time I finish this, I believe I end up with 8. So I've got my 6 repetition rounds, I've got my next row and my foundation row, which equals 8 in total. So just to sort of go through again, just to show you that I wasn't lying, DC does in fact mean double crochet. And again, this is how you use your abbreviation chart, and it will sometimes help you to write this down. So once we've gone through and we've done our foundation rows, we're going to then move on to the pattern part of the blanket. And you'll see here from the front picture that all of the blankets have a border, and then they move into sort of a main section of texture. So moving forward, we will be chaining 2. That's become our new turning chain. And then it's confirming to us that our chain counts as a stitch. And then what we're going to be doing along this row is we're going to miss a double crochet. And then we're going to complete 2 trebles in the next crochet. And I know this is a repetition because I've got the asterisk sign in front of this first part of the section, which is miss 1 double crochet and then 2 treble into the next double crochet. So I'm just going to sort of explain to you, if you imagine this is a linear line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be skipping your first stitch, and then you'll do 2 stitches in the next stitch. You'll skip a stitch and you'll do 2 stitches in the next stitch. You'll skip a stitch, you'll do 2 in the next stitch, and so on. And that is the repetition for that round. That is what is indicated in that asterisk space. So you'll do that right until you get to the last stitch, and then in the last stitch you're just going to complete 1 treble crochet because that's what the pattern tells us to do. And then you'll see for row 2 we are again introducing a chain 2. So the chain 2 is our turning chain, and then we're going to make sure that we're working our first stitch missing out that turning chain. We're not working into the turning chain, so it'll be the 3rd chain from your hook. And again, this is telling us to miss the first treble and do 2 trebles in the next stitch. So exactly the same thing as we had if we have a line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to miss your first stitch, work 2 treble in the second stitch, miss your next stitch and work 2 treble in the next stitch. And because we're missing a stitch and then adding a treble, we're still like doubling the treble. We're still going to end up with the same amount of stitches because for every stitch that we miss, we are increasing in the next stitch along. So our stitch count should remain the same, although where the stitches lay will look slightly different. And it says here that we're going to repeat the second row, row 2 of that pattern until it measures, I think it's 60 something centimetres. Is it 63 centimetres in length? So that's a big part of our pattern worked up essentially, repeating row 2 from between the asterisks. So again, that's important. This is how you read a pattern. What you'll see once you've got through the main body is the next rows are essentially a repetition of the beginning of the blanket. So again, you're now creating the top of the border, which looks slightly different to the main texture. And if you have a look at how many rows you had at the beginning and how many rows it's asking you to do at the end, you'll see that they match. So moving on to an amigurumi pattern, this is one of my patterns, it's written in the round. The only difference with this pattern to the pattern we've just looked at is mine uses US terminology. You'll find James C. Brett, Signet, Stylecraft, they are UK sort of manufacturers, yarn sellers, so they write in UK terminology. If you download patterns from Etsy or the internet, YouTube, you'll often find them worked in US. And when you come to doing the motion of crochet, you'll probably agree that US terminology makes more sense. So like the other pattern, I've got a list of materials in my pattern, and my pattern is on its own, but also comes as part of a kit. So my pattern instructions in terms of materials tell you what you need to use in order to replicate my design. And I've been quite specific with branding and colours there. I've also explained, because this is an amigurumi, you'll need stuffing. You'll need to use stitch markers to mark the beginning and end of your rounds. You'll need a darning needle to sew up your ends. You'll need safety eyes. You'll need scissors, etc. So I've given quite a comprehensive list of all of the materials that you'll need. I've also got my abbreviation table, and you'll see in brackets I've indicated that this is US. So again, that follows the same as the previous pattern. And you'll see that I've made it clear in my instructions that this is written in US terminology. And I've also fully explained that anything between asterisks indicates that it's a repetition, and you will see that through until the end of the round. So I choose to do my patterns in a table formation, and you can see that I've got row/round, I've got the instructions, and I've also got a count. So my first line of this pattern is using a magic ring, you're going to single crochet 6 into the magic ring. And I know that based on my abbreviations, MR equals magic ring and SC equals single crochet. And you'll see that within my pattern, I've also said if you don't like to use the magic ring, you can use an alternative method, and I've explained what that is. So you'll see that we then move on to the next row, and the next row is an increase round. So this is telling you to do 2 stitches for every 1 stitch you had in the previous round. And you'll see that basically means that our count at the end is doubled. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch you'll do another 2 stitches, in the next stitch another 2, in the next stitch another 2, and so on. And I have indicated with my count at the end that at the end of row 2, which is your increase round, you'll have 12 stitches now instead of 6 that you had on your first round. And this follows along. So row 3, you'll do 1 single crochet, and then in the next stitch you will do 2. And you'll see again that I have indicated a row count or a round count at the end if you follow what the instructions tell you. And if you were to flip back to the front, you'll see that INC is an abbreviation for increase, and increase means to put 2 stitches where there was only 1. And again, it can get quite frustrating when using leaflet patterns, having to flip between one to the other. So working from your working page, then flipping back to your abbreviation page. In those circumstances, it can be helpful to write the abbreviations out in full. And again, as before, I would highly recommend that you read through your pattern at least twice before you start to commence work on it. And that doesn't just mean the actual pattern itself, it means making sure that you've got the right tools, making sure you understand or are familiar with what those abbreviations are, understanding in my pattern example that it's US terminology. If you've attended one of our workshops, I've given you a crochet cheat sheet, and that has a table of US to UK terminology explained. So that again may be something that you want to write out or cut out and have somewhere handy. I take pictures on my phone a lot of the time, so I'll just have little pictures on my phone that I can open up when I am working. So again, just to reiterate, in pattern notes, etc. are really important. I don't think that can be sort of overstated enough. And just to show you here, my decreased rounds mirror my increased rounds because Bertie the bee is worked up as sort of like a cylinder shape. Anyway, I hope that that has given you some useful information. I hope that that helps you to become sort of familiar with patterns, how they look and what their expectations are. And I hope to see you in another video soon.